Hello, I'm Anna Mayers, and today I'm joined by the creators of new short film, The Poet and the Plant. It shows the life of a lonely poet who loves his new household plant so much that he ends up killing it. We have co-director Tom Basis and writer, star and co-director Rob Summerlin here to have a chat and dive into their film. But before we look at that, please both of you introduce yourselves, as I'd love to know a bit more about you and how you got started in the industry.
Tom, go for it.
My family's from Israel. I was born and raised in New Jersey. Then went to film school, the School of Visual Arts in New York City, where I majored in directing and all other sort of facets of filmmaking. Really kind of fell in love with philosophy and theater and sort of got lost in all the other art forms due to my, I guess, like dissatisfaction with some of what was happening in the film world. But then for the past 10 years or so, have been in commercials, working with some bigger name directors and also directing on my own. And couldn't quite find the time and the right project to really dedicate to I guess we call it a personal project. Didn't really find the moment to really start building up another short film. And Rob came to me with a poem. I think it was like a 3-page poem. It wasn't even a film. It was just a really beautiful story. And from there, it just kind of kept becoming something much larger than what I ever imagined. But Rob, maybe a little bit of your story as well.
And I think that's a fun part of our dynamic is Tom is like a proper director, writer, who's gone to film school. And I studied French and advertising, not really knowing what I wanted to do. My mom's French, so I grew up watching a lot of French films and felt that there was like a charm and a wit and a depth to a lot of the films, French films I watched. So always within me there was a little hidden desire to start making films like the ones I had watched growing up, thanks to my mom. So went to school, got out of school, did a whole bunch of traveling, and then lived in New York City and realized that I wanted to write and wanted to write and be an artist. So was sort of digging away and didn't really know what I wanted to do really or what I should be doing. But at some point, poetry was singing to me and I was just having the time of my life writing poems, and that ended. And I kept writing poems even though I wasn't enjoying it. And I think that's definitely a big part of the poet is, feeling that this is what he's supposed to be doing, is writing poems, and he's sort of wrestling with poems. And I think the big lesson I've learned as an artist, formerly in his 20s, is do what you want to do, not what you feel like you should do. And I think realizing that, I could have fun while creating led me to looking at this story differently, and then approaching Tom, and then we went for it, which was a good idea because we've had the time of our life.
Yeah, it is a brilliant, beautiful film, and you've both read my review, and I loved it. I thought it really was magical and different, and had something about it that I feel everyone can relate to, something in it. I know that you spoke about the beginnings of it being poetry. How did you know when it was going to become something else, that there was something in it that you thought, this isn't just some words on some paper, this has to be a short film?
Yeah, I guess it was well, yeah, the original poems, it was centered around this idea from a text I got from a friend who had listened to me just vent about my staghorn plants and killing them. And we were on a bench in Central Park, and later that afternoon she sent me a text and she said, why don't you just strap the staghorn to the front of your bike next time you go out? It probably just needs sunlight and fresh air. And when she told me that, it was just this like watershed moment, just thinking, oh, it's so simple. And yet, like, as a poet or an artist, we can get so lost in our thoughts, in our worlds, in our project, that we forget that the solution's pretty simple. And when she sent me that text, I just had this vision of this poet who takes himself and his art so seriously, finally like unburdened and riding on his bicycle with the staghorn fern on the front of the bike, through Central Park to La Traviata's Prelude. And I think that song and that scene really was sort of the engine to begin with. And then we took it from there.
And in many ways, Rob was also, obviously he acted as the poet, and as you could hear from his anecdotes, it's a very, very true story. So for me, it was a no-brainer to say, you know what, you have to act in this, and we have to shoot it in your studio, which is where we ended up shooting. So it really did become sort of this like art imitating life experience, but it also, I'm sure you know, with filmmaking, constantly evolved, right? Like we kept repeating this thing of like, you have 3 films, right? You have your script, you have your film that you shot, and then you have what you edit. And ultimately it's going to become something different, but because it was so close to home, we just let it breathe, and all we wanted to do is honor the staghorn, really honor the truth behind the motivation to actually make it. So keeping it simple was really the best that we could do, was to just keep it simple.
Yeah, I think that's what makes it such a brilliant film. The simplicity of it just makes it so beautiful. Tom, just talking about it kind of being not about Rob, but we definitely see Rob in this as this character with this staghorn that he's trying to save. Did you find it difficult to kind of come in with your ideas, or did you find that you worked well together to really make this film blossom? Not to make you have a fight or anything, but
no, I mean it's 2 parts really. It's one thing that we kept saying over and over and over again, is that 2 heads are better than 1. And I think there's a subtext to that statement, which is 2 heads that are able to put their egos aside are better than 1. And we constantly made sure that we were checking ourselves whenever the ideas would come up, or whenever someone had a suggestion. We let everything breathe and fully develop to see if it fit and if it worked and if it would stick. But also just from the type of directing that I like to do, there's just another quote that I got from last year, which was, the more personal you make something, the more universal it becomes. And for me, as an artist, I sometimes struggle with that, because I feel that the word personal means that I have to take it from inside somewhere and evolve it and manifest it. But there's another beautiful, nuanced aspect to directing, which is the in between the takes, speaking to your actor. Even sometimes it's a whisper, sometimes it's half a sentence, but that's where it gets really personal for me, because I would give Rob direction that had to do with love, had to do with meditation, had to do with insecurity. And these are things that I have no trouble projecting. So those are things that I really, that's how it became really personal to me. And then obviously through the editing process, it was, because we co-directed. So, right, for him to be in front of camera for almost 80% of the film, we would, a lot of times Rob would come back and we would watch playback, or he would just say, I trust you, let's keep going. And then when we would go into the editing, it was full on 2 directors and an editor, and that was its own experience as well.
Well, it sounds like it's been a great experience for both of you, and I don't know, something that's made you grow as kind of directors and creative people. Rob, what was it like to write, act, and co-direct, and then be in the editing suite, be doing music, all of that? Was it quite a heavy thing on your shoulders, or did you find it kind of the easiest way to help this film come to life?
Yeah, well, I guess I love the sort of the feel of, not having the money or the time or the resources, and just wanting to do everything, or being open to doing anything it takes to make the vision come to life. So I'm not an actor, but I felt, I ask people to collaborate all the time, and no one answers my calls. And I really want this to get done. I know I will show up. And I think part of the style Tom and I like is underacting, just for it to be natural and simple. So yeah, that was an interesting part. But I think Tom is sort of missing in a lot of the credits because, and it's a question we had, whether to give Tom writing credit because he was such a big part of the writing process. But I guess we decided not to, since we feel that I sort of did the mining and dug deep into the subconscious and into life and brought up the original sort of form, and that should be credited. But from that point on, it was, Tom was editing, he was giving me notes, and basically from this crude rock, we were able to sculpt something together, truly as a team. And then even acting, I had Tom there who had the vision in mind and who was able to bring me to where I needed to be, based on this shared vision we created together. And so I like to say we everything together. So it was almost like, it wasn't that daunting because Tom was always there every step of the way. So that was great. It was great. And especially as a writer, and as a poet, to be able to collaborate is just such a dream. And that's what was especially potent about filming and being on set, was working with the crew who are all the masters of their trade, and then working with everyone else. And it's this collective, it's so musical and symphonic, and everyone's working as hard as they can for this, to make the most beautiful thing they can make. And that was incredibly powerful. And as saying it now makes me ready to shoot another film.
It really is brilliant to hear that you've really had this great partnership, because that's it. We know that co-directing doesn't always work, but it's so lovely to hear that it has, and especially larger than that, along with your crew, you've made this really lovely film. So we've kind of discussed the poet and creating that part, but I'd love to go into the star herself, the Staghorn, voiced by Sarah Snook. Was the story always going to be told from the perspective of the plant and with narration, or was that something that one day you just thought, wow, it would be really cool if we saw it from the plant's point of view rather than the poet's?
Great question. And that goes back to my answer to the last question, which was, I had always, from the get-go, written it from the poet's point of view. he talks about his experience, and then one day Tom comes into a meeting and says, it's got to be from the plant's perspective. And I don't know, Tom, where did that come from?
It came, I always said that you and I mentioned it on set and we laughed about it. And then one day while I remember the beginning of editing being semi challenging as a lot of editing sort of starts off, trying to again fit that second iteration of your story into its third. And something about the character on screen being also the narrator didn't feel like it was taking the we kept having this theory that there was always going to be one specific way for this to be, and that was going to be the best way. And if we were ever at 75% or 80%, it wasn't right. We needed to keep trying. And it was honestly in the shower where one day I was like, why doesn't she narrate it? And for a week, I think I even called my aunt and she recorded it for me and sent it via email, and we used that as a temp. And then we, I remember it didn't happen right away. I remember, Rob, you were a little hesitant at first.
Yeah.
And we tried a lot of things. We tried, 70-year-old man. We tried a little kid. We were obsessed with it being an English accent for a while. But to me, it was always going to be her story to tell, not necessarily her story. And I think that's something that once we figured that out, I think it really resonated with us, because one thing that Rob, I'd love for you to touch on was talking about the victim's point of view, right?
Yeah, which goes back to a project we had worked on earlier, which was about a man who has a motel and he listens to all his guests. He's a voyeur.
Oh,
but audibly.
That sounds really interesting.
Yeah. and the hero of the film was this sort of quirky younger woman, and she was clever enough and more alive than the other guests who were staying there, and realizes she's being spied on. But instead of punishing the innkeeper, she decides and realizes, this is just a lonely man. Why don't I do things that'll make him feel better? Because clearly, no one else would be doing this unless they're sad and sick. So she finds all these really tender ways to make him feel better, and reads to him and does all these lovely things for the innkeeper. And I think that story revealed this sort of belief that Tom and I have, which is, women will save the world, and they will save the world because they have hearts, and they are tender, and they are loving, and they are not vengeful. And it's through compassion and sort of the feminine gentleness and compassion and tenderness that we can save the world, both as men and women, sort of that feeling. So yeah, I guess that was part of this story was hearing what the staghorn had to say. Is nature mad at us for treating it so horribly so much of the time? How does nature feel when we kill it? And of course, just personifying a plant is sort of delightful, and in the exact sort of thing Tom and I would be excited about if we saw it in someone else's work.
And also we can't forget, and unfortunately it didn't make it, but it's something stylistically that I refuse to let go of. But in the original iteration where the poet was still the narrator, the plant had one line of dialogue which was subtitled. And we kept trying it and it just didn't stick. But it was something that we were so excited about that that subtitle ended up just becoming an actual diegetic voice, which I guess it's not really diegetic because her lips aren't moving, but still it was always there, you know. I think something that we used to talk about also was that this is like the ghost of the staghorn constantly trying to make sure that she's heard, you know. And the third part that I always go back to is that we can't forget, even like in your review, we can't forget that he's already murdered two plants. But for some reason, this one has stayed alive, right? Green in spite of everything. And that's so honorable and inspiring that like I personally just want to know more about why did she survive, you know? And I think that's why it's so exciting to have that third plant be the narrator of this poet's story, right? It's definitely the poet and the plant, but it's really the poet and the three plants told by the third plant's point of view, you know?
Yeah, I really wish you guys may make a sequel one day where we just have the staghorn and what happens to them next. I need to know. But there is that beauty of them both going their separate ways, and it really is lovely. And just talking more about nature and things, I know that you didn't set about to make an environmental film, but after making the film and seeing it, do you personally see the story differently to how it originally set out, and especially in the world's current climate? Literally and metaphorically.
Mm, yeah. Well, I think that's part of the joy of creating, is just doing. And actually, I have a friend in London, um, Emily Renee, and we just Skyped actually a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about creativity. And at one point, I said, you know, the role of an artist's job is to thrill himself or herself. And then I sent her an email a week after the call saying, honestly, I think that's too lofty. I think we should just try to amuse ourselves. And I think that's what we did. We just, you follow what sings to you, you follow what you like. And I think when it's sort of unconscious in that way, all these things you love end up appearing, but you don't see them till later. And I think that's what was cool about this project, was working on it and then stepping back and seeing the final thing and realizing the message, at least one of them, is that human kindness and that kindness will save the environment. You know, if we can be kind to one another, that is how we're going to get ourselves out of this mess and all the messes, which is especially relevant to the climate we have now with, you know, the systematic racism that's been, you know, sort of overlooked by too many for too long, finally being addressed and hopefully bringing about change. But, and as an environmentalist, you know, you're so fixated on the environment that you can lose track of other causes that are really important. So, and I love that, because I don't think we really hear it, you know, that just being kind to each other can save the environment. It's very low tech.
That's so true. And also, I think the concept of doing some kind of activism through fiction as opposed to a docu-series was something that really inspired us, where it's like you could create positive filmmaking through story. You could inspire people to take action through story. You don't there's more than one way. It doesn't have to just be details and facts and PSAs and calls to action. There, you could hit someone a little bit more emotionally through a narrative and maybe inspire some positive action.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I often do find that fiction possibly sometimes inspires me more than the facts. I spoke about it in my review, and I am a plant murderer, which makes me not very happy because I never want to murder anything. Um, I just don't seem to have any luck with plants, although I currently have three that are doing quite well. Um, did you grow attached to the staghorns in the film and what you would potentially be doing to them?
Yeah, well, we forgot to do it. We meant to put in the film, staghorns were harmed or plants were harmed in the making of this film, which you don't find in films, which should be mentioned because plants are living things and we should honor them and respect them. But this story was based on the last of three that I had bought that kept living. And at one point I said, this thing's probably dead. And yet I'm still watering it. Like, what am I doing?
Always got to have hope.
Yeah. It's, I just overly idealistic and blind you to reality, which I think many poets can relate to. But the one we used on set, not to be a party pooper, but those were just props and we didn't have them very long. So there was no real attachment, but other than them being a glorious plant and us loving them.
Yeah, I mean, our production designer did an incredible job at, as many films are, we didn't shoot linearly. So he did an incredible job at having at least 5 or 6 staghorns at different death rates, different brownness, different, they were all ready to go and be replaced onto a different wooden plank at all times so that the continuity would stay consistent. But this project means a lot to me, but I wonder if you feel like the way you're looking at your plants has changed in any way.
Yeah, I think it has. I was thinking about this the other day when I was thinking of questions to ask you guys. And I was just thinking how I used to name all of my plants. I would give them a human name because they have feelings, as we have learnt from this film. However, when they died, I then felt really, really awful that I'd given them names and I'd painted their pots and given them feelings, and suddenly they were no longer living and in my bedroom, and they were not having a good time. So looking at the plants in my room whilst I was watching the film, I was just thinking, wow, one, I'm so glad I haven't named these. So if they ever do die, I don't feel as bad. But two, I feel that I need to respect them more. And they are part of looking pretty and nice in my bedroom, but actually they often need to go outside and have a bit of sun and have a bit of nature's bedroom, really. So that they can survive. A question that I feel everyone wants to know the answer to, Rob, whether it's a sad answer or not, is the original staghorn that it's based on still with us?
Not in staghorn form. That was honestly there was times in the beginning of this process where I would have like cosmic moments, these teeny little moments in life where all these serendipitous things line up. And so many times I would see, I would think about this idea for a film and look up and there would be a staghorn. And so it felt like for a long time I was being haunted by the dead staghorn, and that this dead staghorn wanted me to create a film about its life and death. And I think we've served the staghorn. The staghorn would be thrilled that Sarah Snook voiced it in the film. So yeah, it's definitely still alive. It may be a ghost still, or not.
well, you have given the Staghorn a beautiful legacy and send off. If I was the Staghorn, I would be pleased. I have a few kind of funny questions to finish, just so we can have a bit of a joke. When I was looking through the things for your film, and I got sent your kind of biographies about you and whatever. Rob, your profile picture is a beautiful black and white photo, but then at a closer inspection, you have a cat face paint. Can I
Oh
have the story behind that, please?
yeah, that.
I thought it was brilliant. It's brilliant.
Well, you know what? There was about 10,000 things in this short film that luckily, both through the inability to shoot it because we didn't have the time, and through editing, we got rid of and simplified. But there was all these different parts of it, like these clever little winks and little things that were throughout it. And one of them was that the poet tried to make the Staghorn laugh, and I think it's still in the film where he turns around and he's got a fake mustache on, and at one point he would do it again and he had different facial hair, and then he would do it again, he had different facial hair, and then the last one would be a full cat face. And that sounds great, but it just wasn't working. We shot it and it wasn't working, so it was one of the darlings we had to kill, which I think Tom, thank God he persisted, because I didn't want to let Catface go.
I know. I think the mustache shot that is still in it, I enjoy it so much because you could see in the poet's face how desperate he is for a reaction, and he doesn't get it, and in the rest of the world that never made the cut, he keeps trying and trying and trying and he ends up having a cat face. But another really cool sequence that never made it was there's a moment where all the little miniatures in his room start picking on him, and they start getting voices as well. A little Buddha, this woman in a painting, and like a wooden cutout bear. They all start attacking him, and that's another scene that didn't make it as well.
Well, I'm very glad that Catface made it out there, because I appreciate that. I appreciate the little things like that. And I think that the mustache bit was brilliant. That's it. The desperation in the poet's eyes. You could truly see that. Tom, a big question for you. What was it like to direct a nude scene?
It came pretty naturally. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, our production designer, he painted that Staghorn in a bizarre, in like an hour, not even it. As you know, just shooting, and he's doing it in between moving props and whatnot, and then it's like, okay, it's time for the painting scene, and it's like, Rob's got his wardrobe changed, quick makeup. We bring Rob back in front of camera, and in front of him at the easel is a perfectly painted portrait of a plant, and it's like, Rob, now pretend that you're painting this. I mean, I never use the word pretend, but still, like that was a very fun scene. And again, with Sarah, there were many different versions of the narration over that scene, and her beautifully charming Australian accent on top of the word nude really stuck. We really love that moment.
Yeah, Sarah's voice really beautifully complements this film, and yeah, it really was brilliant. Another major part, obviously, when spring comes, Rob, you shaved your head. What was that about? Did you want to? Were you forced? This is a safe space if you want to.
Yeah. Well, yeah, my mom had the same question, and we shot it in her building, and I think it came up right before shooting. Somehow she found out I was shaving my head and was just on the verge of tears, and I couldn't explain it was a story issue, and that essentially the decision came because of we wanted to express inner transformation. There's also this lovely sort of connection with nature, and that, you know, cutting sort of the staghorn fronds, or pruning to allow things to grow even stronger. But I think mostly the decision came from feeling what the poet would be feeling, and realizing it's spring. My God, it's spring. And, you know, sort of that spring cleaning that you feel, where you just want to clear everything out and cut your hair and begin anew. And I think it adds to that feeling of, oh, we're seeing a new man. And I'm glad we did it, even though it complicates things.
Yeah, Rob came up with the idea, no joke, maybe a week before we started shooting. So it changed the entire schedule, but for the better. A really fun scene to edit as well. But yeah, and to shoot, yeah, exactly. I mean, it was extremely freeing to actually, for him as well, are imitating life. You know, at that point, it was what, a 4-day shoot, 3 days inside the studio, cut hair on the end of day 3, and then on the 4th day we're outside with no hair. With one small hiccup, which is the bench scene, which is the only other outdoor scene. He has a full head of hair. So we had to squeeze that into the schedule and come back inside and then go back outside, but it paid off.
Well, that's it. I think for 4 days of filming, you've managed to hit the nail on the head and the staghorn into the wall here, because it really was great. Did you have a favorite dinosaur picture / where did the idea come for that?
Wow, great.
I have one right here on my wall. I wish
You have one? Oh, that's so lucky.
Yeah, you want to bring it down, Tom?
Yeah, let us see.
It's my favorite one, actually.
Well, right and wrong, these are man-made things. They were brilliant. They really were, and they added such a different level to the film. I think that everywhere you looked, there was something, whether it was meant to cause an emotion or something in the film or not. It really did. So yeah, did you have a favorite?
What was a favorite of mine? Well, first off, it comes from Dave Eggers. He did something. It's essentially a copy of what he was doing. I had actually reached out to them to try to get the rights. Never heard back. I was like, I'll just make my own, and I'll make them dinosaurs, and I'll have them say weird things, as they are in the originals. But I guess the idea was, and I think throughout, was just as an insight into his life, and to get more of his thinking and what he experiences, and sort of that New York cynicism that I think he was saturated in before this film took place. And I think one of them was buying a dog as a cry for help.
Yeah.
Above his bed, which is so hardcore cynicism and super dark. But my favorite, oh man, I'm drawing a blank. But what was cool was, after we shot, I told everyone, you could pick whatever one you want. So a bunch of our crew they were so excited to just take one home. It made me really happy. And then to see them framed in Tom's, and then our DP Jui Pang has one up in her house, and so that was super cool. Tom, do you have a favorite?
I'm really glad. Yeah.
The year trash, I still gets me every time.
I think that one's my favorite too.
Tom, I think that's the one you wrote.
Yeah, maybe that's why it's my favorite.
Well, Hannah's favorite too. Dang it. Anna, I wanted to ask you what your, like, if there was a message of the film that stood out for you.
Oh my, just give me a second, sorry.
Yeah, turning the tables. Or, like, what would you, I don't know. Yeah, I guess, what do you feel, if was there a message that stood out more than others?
I don't know. As I was watching it, I just felt that this was such a beautiful portrayal of kind of loneliness and loss of hope, but then also so many other things, how nature can help heal us, but how we need to help heal nature. Something that I think stood out as well was the fact that you are two men, yet you want to amplify these female voices, whether that is of nature or of your crew members, which I think is fantastic. Um, and I think that the biggest thing I took was that Mother Nature, even if it can feel like she's not winning or we're not doing anything to help her, that she will always be there in our lives, whether if it's a cacti sat on our windowsill, or the sunflowers we're growing in our garden, or the fields of grass outside our car windows, that she'll always be there. So whether we kill a house plant or maybe 11, um, she's still going to be there growing strong and big, and whether we want to support her or not, she will always try and thrive, and I think that we just need to be on her side. um that's it. I think that you two and the rest of your crew have made such a fantastic, beautiful, heartwarming film that has so much more meaning than just a poet killing their house plant. My final question is, if people are listening, where can they go and enjoy this film as much as I have?
Yeah, I mean, we're still, then it's going to be the world premieres at the Nantucket Film Festival, which this year is taking the shape of a online festival. You can check it out at their on their website. But we are in the throes of what is called the film festival circuit. It's our first time. This is our debut, and we're learning a lot along the way. Meeting a lot of really, really cool, interesting people. Other filmmakers in our block are also extremely talented and interesting. So it's gonna have a few pops online where you could buy a ticket, and in the next 6 months or so, I imagine it will find a home somewhere where it could be seen forever and ever and ever. But the best place to keep track of us is on our Instagram.
That's
at the
brilliant.
Poet Plant. And yeah, the NantucketFilmFestival.org starts, the festival online starts on the 23rd. It goes till the 30th. And you can get a pass, and we'll be on there. So we hope you watch, and we hope you enjoy.
Yeah, if you're listening, please do go and check this film out. Like I've said, it is brilliant, and the Instagram is at The Poet and the Plant. Again, thank you both very much for being here and answering my questions, both professional and a bit of fun. I've really enjoyed chatting to you both and getting into your minds about this film, and I wish you the best of luck with it.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Anna.